The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat alone in the breakfast room. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her teacup, the delicate china rattling against the saucer. The events of the past few weeks had taken their toll, and the usually composed princess felt the weight of royal expectations pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. William had left early for his duties, kissing her goodbye with a worried expression that spoke volumes. He knew something was wrong, but Catherine had been keeping her struggles to herself. The constant scrutiny, the endless protocols, and the pressure to be perfect at every public appearance had become overwhelming. What made it worse was the subtle but persistent criticism coming from certain quarters of the royal household. Camilla, the queen consort, had never quite warmed to Catherine. While she maintained a polite facade in public, behind closed doors, her disapproval was evident in countless small ways. The way she would purse her lips when Catherine spoke at family meetings, the slight delays in acknowledging her presence, and the occasional cutting remarks disguised as helpful advice had created an atmosphere of tension that seemed to permeate the very walls of the palace. Catherine remembered the incident from 3 days ago when she had suggested a modern approach to one of the upcoming charity events. Camilla had responded with a cold smile, saying, "My dear, some of us understand the weight of tradition better than others. Perhaps you should focus on learning before trying to change things." The words had stung more than Catherine cared to admit, especially coming from someone who had once been considered an outsider herself. The palace staff had begun to notice the divide. They moved carefully between the different factions, aware that loyalties were being tested. Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Sarah, had mentioned overhearing conversations in the staff quarters about the growing tension between the two prominent women of the royal family. The younger staff members seemed to gravitate toward Catherine's more approachable style, while some of the older, more traditional employees remained firmly in Camilla's camp. King Charles III was caught in the middle of this delicate situation. He loved his son William dearly and had grown genuinely fond of Catherine over the years. Her dedication to her royal duties and her natural ability to connect with people had impressed him. At the same time, Camilla was his wife, his companion through years of controversy and eventual acceptance. The balance he tried to maintain between family harmony and royal protocol was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. Catherine's phone buzzed with a message from her private secretary about the day's schedule. A visit to a children's hospital, followed by a meeting with environmental activists, and then an evening reception for foreign diplomats. Each event would require her to put on her public mask, to smile, and engage while her heart felt heavy with uncertainty about her place in this ancient institution. As she prepared to leave for her first engagement, Catherine caught her reflection in the ornate mirror hanging in the corridor. The woman looking back at her seemed tired despite the carefully applied makeup. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, a gesture she had perfected over the years. No matter what happened behind palace walls, the people of Britain deserved to see their future queen at her best. The drive to the hospital gave her time to compose herself. She watched the familiar streets of London pass by, remembering the early days of her relationship with William when everything seemed simpler. Back then, she had been naive about the complexities of royal life, focusing only on their love and the fairy tale aspects of their romance. Reality had proven far more challenging than any fairy tale. At the hospital, Catherine found her rhythm again. The children's faces lit up as she walked through the wards, and their genuine joy reminded her why she had embraced this role despite its difficulties. A 7-year-old girl named Emma, recovering from surgery, shyly handed her a drawing of a princess with a crown. "This is you," Emma whispered. "You're my favorite princess because you're real and nice." The simple words from an innocent child touched something deep within Catherine. This was why she endured the palace politics and the personal attacks. These moments of genuine human connection made everything worthwhile. She spent extra time with Emma, talking about her favorite books and promising to send her some new ones to read during her recovery. As the hospital visit concluded, Catherine felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges awaited her back at the palace, she would face them with dignity and strength. She had chosen this life, chosen to marry into the most scrutinized family in the world, and she would not let anyone make her feel unworthy of her position. The afternoon meeting with environmental activists went smoothly, with Catherine demonstrating her knowledge and passion for conservation issues. These were causes close to her heart, and she spoke eloquently about the need for sustainable practices and protecting the planet for future generations. The activists left the meeting impressed by her genuine commitment and understanding of complex environmental challenges. However, as evening approached and she prepared for the diplomatic reception, Catherine's anxiety returned. These formal events were where the palace dynamics played out most visibly. Every interaction was watched and analyzed, every gesture interpreted for hidden meanings. She knew Camilla would be there, playing her role as queen consort with practiced ease, and the comparison between them would be inevitable. The reception hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and was filled with elegantly dressed guests from around the world. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced grace, engaging in diplomatic small talk and representing her country with poise. But she was acutely aware of Camilla's presence across the room, holding court with a group of ambassadors. As the evening progressed, an incident occurred that would change everything. A visiting dignitary's wife, clearly having had too much champagne, approached Catherine and made a comment about how refreshing it was to see someone so young and modern representing the royal family. The woman's voice carried across the room, and Catherine noticed Camilla's expression darken noticeably. Later, as guests began to depart, Catherine found herself alone for a moment on one of the palace balconies, seeking a breath of fresh air. The events of the day had been emotionally draining, and she needed a moment to collect herself before returning to the formal atmosphere inside. It was there, in that quiet moment overlooking the palace gardens, that King Charles found her. His approach was gentle, his expression one of genuine concern. "Catherine," he said softly, "might we have a word?" The conversation on the balcony that evening would mark a turning point in the royal family dynamics. King Charles studied Catherine's face in the soft glow of the palace lights, noting the fatigue that no amount of makeup could fully conceal. His own journey to the throne had been long and often difficult, marked by public scrutiny and personal challenges that had tested his resolve countless times. "You've been carrying a heavy burden lately," Charles said, his voice gentle but direct. "I've noticed the changes, the way you've withdrawn during family gatherings. As your father-in-law and your king, I'm concerned." Catherine felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. Here was the man who had welcomed her into the family, who had walked her down the aisle when her own father was too ill to do so. His kindness in that moment reminded her of why she had always felt a special connection to him, despite the formal protocols that usually governed their interactions. "Your Majesty," she began, but Charles raised his hand gently. "Charles, please. We're family, Catherine. Tell me what's troubling you." The words came slowly at first, then, in a rush as months of suppressed frustration poured out. Catherine spoke about feeling isolated, about the constant criticism disguised as guidance, about the way certain members of the household seemed determined to undermine her confidence. She was careful not to mention Camilla directly, but Charles was perceptive enough to understand the source of much of her distress. "I sometimes wonder if I'm truly suited for this life," Catherine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "No matter how hard I try, it seems I'm always falling short of someone's expectations." Charles listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. He had suspected that tensions were building within the family, but hearing the depth of Catherine's struggles shocked him. This was the woman who would one day be queen, the mother of his grandchildren, and someone he had come to regard as a daughter. Her pain was his pain, and he felt a surge of protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. "Catherine," he said firmly, "you are not falling short. You are exactly what this institution needs. Your compassion, your ability to connect with people, your dedication to service. These qualities are precious and rare. Anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Charles sharing his own experiences of feeling like an outsider in his early years. He spoke about the loneliness of royal life, the weight of constant judgment, and the importance of staying true to one's values despite external pressures. His words were a balm to Catherine's wounded spirit, and, for the first time in months, she felt truly understood. Meanwhile, inside the reception hall, Camilla had noticed the king's absence. She excused herself from her conversation with the Belgian ambassador and began searching for Charles. Her instincts told her something significant was happening, and she felt a familiar surge of anxiety whenever Charles was out of her sight for extended periods. A helpful staff member directed her toward the balconies, and Camilla's steps quickened. Through the glass doors, she could see the silhouettes of two figures in deep conversation. As she drew closer, she recognized Charles and Catherine, their heads bent together in what appeared to be an intimate discussion. Something about their posture, the way Charles was leaning toward Catherine with obvious concern and affection, triggered a response in Camilla that she struggled to control. She had worked too hard and waited too long to establish her position as Charles's queen to watch it be undermined by anyone, even someone as seemingly innocent as Catherine. The years of being the other woman, of fighting for acceptance and respect, had left scars that never quite healed. Any threat to her status, real or imagined, awakened old insecurities and defensive instincts. Camilla pushed open the balcony doors, her entrance interrupting the moment between Charles and Catherine. "Charles, darling," she said, her voice carrying a note of possessiveness that didn't go unnoticed. "Our guests are asking for you." The ambassador from Japan specifically requested a private word. Charles looked up, momentarily annoyed by the interruption. He had been making real progress with Catherine, helping her see her worth and place in the family. "Can it wait a few more minutes, my dear? Catherine and I were having an important conversation." The fact that he chose to continue talking to Catherine rather than immediately attending to Camilla's request was noted by all three of them. It was a small thing, but in the intricate dance of royal protocol and personal relationships, small things often carried enormous weight. "Of course," Camilla replied, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Catherine, you look lovely this evening. That color suits you beautifully." The compliment was delivered with perfect politeness, but somehow managed to sound condescending. Catherine thanked her graciously and excused herself, sensing the tension in the air. As she left the balcony, she heard Camilla's voice change, becoming sharper and more pointed as she began speaking to Charles in rapid, urgent tones. The words weren't clear, but the emotional undertone was unmistakable. Over the following days, the atmosphere in the palace grew increasingly strained. Camilla's behavior toward Catherine became more openly critical, and she began making subtle changes to royal protocols that seemed designed to diminish Catherine's role. Guest lists were modified without consultation, charitable patronages were questioned, and staff assignments were shuffled in ways that isolated Catherine from her most trusted advisors. The breaking point came during a family dinner at Sandringham. The gathering was meant to be informal, a chance for the extended royal family to spend time together away from official duties. But informality had its own dangers, as it allowed personal tensions to surface more easily. The conversation had turned to upcoming royal tours, with various family members discussing their planned visits to different countries. Catherine mentioned her excitement about a potential trip to Africa to highlight conservation efforts, something she had been planning for months with the help of experienced advisors. "Africa," Camilla interjected, her tone suggesting mild surprise. "My dear, are you quite sure you're ready for such a complex undertaking? The political sensitivities alone require years of experience to navigate properly. Perhaps something closer to home would be more appropriate for now." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. William looked up from his conversation with Prince Edward, his expression darkening as he realized what was happening. This wasn't constructive criticism or helpful guidance. This was a deliberate attempt to undermine his wife's confidence and authority. Catherine felt the familiar flush of embarrassment and anger, but before she could respond, Charles set down his wine glass with enough force to make it ring against the table. The sound drew everyone's attention, and the king's expression left no doubt about his feelings on the matter. "Catherine's African tour will proceed as planned," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. "She has my complete confidence and support. The people of those nations are fortunate to have someone of her caliber representing our country." The silence that followed was deafening. Never before had Charles so publicly and definitively sided against Camilla in favor of Catherine. The message was clear to everyone present. Catherine was under the king's protection, and any further attempts to undermine her would be considered a personal affront to him. Camilla's face went pale, then flushed red as the implications of the moment sank in. She had overplayed her hand, pushed too hard, and now found herself publicly rebuked by her own husband. The humiliation was complete and witnessed by the entire family. The dinner concluded in uncomfortable silence, with family members making polite excuses to leave early. As the dining room emptied, Catherine found herself alone with Charles once again. This time, there were no words needed. His defense of her had spoken volumes about where his loyalties lay and how much he valued her contribution to the royal family. The aftermath of the Sandringham dinner created ripples throughout the royal household that could be felt for weeks. Camilla retreated to her private apartments, canceling several public engagements with vague explanations about feeling unwell. Those close to her knew better. The queen consort was dealing with a personal crisis that threatened to shake the very foundation of her marriage and her position within the royal family. Charles found himself in an impossible situation. His public defense of Catherine had been necessary and heartfelt, but it had created a rift with his wife that seemed to grow wider with each passing day. Camilla's silence was more troubling than any argument might have been. She moved through their shared spaces like a ghost, polite but distant, responding to his attempts at conversation with monosyllables and forced smiles. Catherine, meanwhile, threw herself into her royal duties with renewed vigor. The king's public support had given her a confidence she hadn't felt in months. She worked late into the evenings, reviewing briefings for her upcoming African tour and meeting with conservation experts who would accompany her. The trip had taken on symbolic importance far beyond its original scope. It represented her emergence as a senior royal in her own right, independent of anyone else's approval or permission. The palace staff watched these developments with a mixture of fascination and anxiety. Veteran employees who had served multiple monarchs recognized the signs of a major shift in the power dynamics. Young staff members found themselves having to choose sides in ways that made them uncomfortable, while senior advisors worked overtime to prevent the personal drama from affecting the monarchy's public image. William was caught between supporting his wife and trying to maintain family peace. He had been furious about his stepmother's treatment of Catherine, but he also understood the delicate balance his father was trying to maintain. During a private meeting with Charles in the king's study, the conversation was frank and sometimes heated. "She's been systematically trying to undermine Catherine for months," William said, his usual diplomatic restraint abandoned. "The constant criticism, the subtle put-downs, the way she tries to exclude her from important decisions. It's unacceptable, and you know it." Charles rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his years, and his crown more heavily than usual. "I know, William. I've seen it too, and I should have addressed it sooner. But Camilla is my wife, and this situation is more complicated than you realize." "What's complicated about treating my wife with basic respect?" William's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. "Catherine has done nothing but serve this family with dignity and grace. She doesn't deserve to be treated like an unwelcome outsider in her own home." The conversation lasted for 2 hours, with both men struggling to find a path forward that wouldn't tear the family apart. Charles revealed some of Camilla's insecurities that William had never fully understood: her fear of being overshadowed by younger, more popular members of the family, her sensitivity about still being seen as the woman who broke up his parents' marriage, and her desperate need to feel secure in her position. "None of that excuses her behavior," William said firmly. "But I understand it better now. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Charles's answer came in the form of a private meeting with Camilla that evening. He found her in the blue drawing room, reading a biography of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, perhaps seeking comfort in the story of another woman who had navigated the complexities of royal life. She looked up as he entered, her expression carefully neutral. "We need to talk," Charles said, settling into the chair across from her. "Really talk, not just exchange pleasantries and pretend everything is fine." Camilla closed her book and set it aside, her hands folding in her lap in a gesture that reminded Charles of a schoolgirl called before the headmaster. "I suppose we do," she said quietly. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of their marriage. Charles spoke about his growing concern for Catherine's welfare and his disappointment in Camilla's behavior. He was gentle but firm, making it clear that he would not tolerate any further attempts to undermine his daughter-in-law. "I never intended to hurt Catherine," Camilla said, her voice small. "But sometimes, watching her move through this world with such apparent ease, I remember how hard it was for me to find my place here. The criticism I endured, the hatred from some quarters, the constant comparison to Diana, it never really went away." Charles reached across the space between them and took her hand. "Darling, you've more than earned your place here. Your work, your dedication, the way you've supported me, none of that is in question. But Catherine isn't your enemy, and she isn't trying to diminish you. She's family. She makes it look so effortless," Camilla whispered. "The way people respond to her, the natural way she connects with everyone from children to world leaders. Sometimes I feel like I'm still the other woman, still fighting for acceptance that she was simply given." "You were given that acceptance too," Charles said firmly. "By me, by the people of this country, by history itself. Your coronation proved that. But You're in danger of throwing it all away because of jealousy that has no foundation in reality. Meanwhile, across London, Catherine was having dinner with her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, at their London apartment. For once, she had allowed herself to drop her royal facade completely, sitting on the floor in casual clothes while her mother rubbed her shoulders and her father made tea in the kitchen. "You look tired, darling," Carol observed. "This royal life is taking its toll, isn't it?" Catherine leaned into her mother's touch, grateful for the simple comfort of family love without protocol or expectation. "It's been challenging lately. There are personalities to navigate, and sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for all of this." "You're the strongest person I know," her father said, returning with the tea service. "But strength doesn't mean you have to face everything alone. Have you talked to Charles about what's been happening?" Catherine smiled for the first time in days. "Actually, yes. He's been incredibly supportive. I think I've been wrong to try to handle everything by myself." "The king recognizes quality when he sees it," Michael said with parental pride. "He knows what you bring to the royal family, even if others are too blind or too threatened to see it." The support of both her birth family and her royal father-in-law gave Catherine the strength she needed to face the weeks ahead. The palace machinery was already in motion for her African tour, with security preparations, diplomatic protocols, and media arrangements all moving forward at full speed. But first, there would be another family gathering, this one at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The annual summer retreat was traditionally a time for the royal family to relax and reconnect away from the pressures of London. This year, however, everyone knew it would be a test of whether the family could heal from the recent tensions or whether the divisions would prove permanent. Charles spent the days before the Scotland trip carefully orchestrating conversations and meetings designed to rebuild bridges. He met separately with each family member, explaining his perspective and asking for their support in creating a more harmonious atmosphere. His message was consistent. The monarchy was bigger than any individual personality conflicts, and they all had a responsibility to put the institution's welfare above their personal feelings. The most crucial conversation was with Harry, who had remained largely neutral during the recent drama but whose opinion carried weight with the younger generation of royals. Charles found his younger son in the palace library, researching his own upcoming charitable initiatives. "Your brother is lucky to have Catherine," Charles began without preamble. "She's brought stability and purpose to his life in ways that have surprised even me." Harry looked up from his papers, his expression serious. "She's good for all of us, actually. The way she handles the pressure, the genuineness she brings to everything. It reminds us why we do this work in the first place." "I need your help in Scotland," Charles said. "The family needs healing, and that requires everyone working together. Camilla is struggling with some insecurities that have manifested in unfortunate ways, but she's not evil. Catherine deserves support and protection, but Camilla deserves compassion and understanding." Harry nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me show that we're united. That despite our differences and occasional conflicts, we're still a family that supports each other. The public is watching, and more importantly, future generations of our family are watching how we handle this crisis." As the royal convoy prepared to leave for Scotland, everyone understood that the next few days would determine the future dynamics of the Windsor family. Catherine packed her bags with a mixture of nervousness and determination, while Camilla wrestled with her own demons and the knowledge that she had perhaps pushed too hard and too far. Charles stood at his office window, watching the preparations below and thinking about his mother's wisdom during her own family crises. Queen Elizabeth II had always managed to keep the family together through sheer force of will and an unshakable belief in the importance of their shared duty. Now it was his turn to prove worthy of that legacy. The Scottish Highlands had always held a special magic for the royal family, and Balmoral Castle stood as a testament to generations of Windsor summers filled with both joy and sorrow. This particular August gathering would test the healing power of the ancient stones and rolling landscapes that had witnessed so many family reconciliations over the decades. Catherine arrived with William and their children, grateful for the informal atmosphere that Balmoral traditionally provided. The children ran ahead toward the castle entrance, their excitement at seeing their grandfather infectious even in the current tense circumstances. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no awareness of the adult tensions that had been building over the summer, and their innocent joy served as a reminder of what truly mattered. Charles greeted his family at the entrance with genuine warmth, sweeping his grandchildren into enthusiastic hugs before turning to William and Catherine. His embrace of his daughter-in-law was perhaps a fraction longer than usual, a subtle signal to anyone watching that his support for her remained unwavering. Camilla appeared in the doorway moments later, and, for a brief instant, Catherine saw something unexpected in her expression: uncertainty, perhaps even vulnerability. The queen consort's usual composed mask had slipped slightly, revealing the insecure woman beneath the royal title. It was a humanizing moment that caught Catherine off guard. "Catherine, dear," Camilla said, her voice carefully modulated. "You look well. The Highland air will do you good, I'm sure." "Thank you," Catherine replied graciously. "I'm looking forward to spending time with the family away from all the London pressures." The first few days passed with careful politeness as family members navigated the new dynamics. Charles had clearly spoken to everyone, because there was a noticeable effort being made to include Catherine more fully in conversations and activities. Even Camilla seemed to be making an effort, though her interactions with Catherine remained somewhat stilted and formal. The breakthrough came on the third evening, during what had become a family tradition, a barbecue by the river that Charles himself insisted on cooking. The informal setting, combined with the beautiful Scottish evening and perhaps a glass or two of wine, began to lower the carefully maintained barriers. Catherine found herself helping Camilla arrange flowers picked from the castle gardens for the outdoor tables. The work required them to collaborate, to communicate about practical matters without the weight of royal protocol. For the first time in months, they were simply two women working together on a common task. "Your children are lovely," Camilla said quietly as they worked. "Louis reminds me so much of William at that age, the same mischievous energy." "Thank you," Catherine replied, surprised by the genuine warmth in Camilla's tone. "They adore their grandfather Charles. He's wonderful with them." "He is, isn't he?" Camilla smiled, and for a moment her face transformed. "I never thought I'd see him with grandchildren. For so many years, it seemed like that joy might never come." Something in her voice made Catherine look up from the flowers she was arranging. There was a wistfulness there, a hint of the loneliness that had perhaps driven some of Camilla's recent behavior. Suddenly, Catherine saw past the royal titles and protocol disputes to something more fundamental. Two women who both loved the same man in different ways and wanted to protect their place in his life. "The children love you too," Catherine said gently. "Charlotte especially enjoys your stories about the horses." Camilla's eyes brightened. "She's a natural writer, that one. Fearless but sensible. Good qualities for a princess." The conversation continued as they finished the flower arrangements, touching on safe topics like the children's interests and the beauty of the Highland landscape. It wasn't deep or transformative, but it was civil and even pleasant, a start towards something better than the hostility that had marked recent months. Charles watched from across the garden where he was manning the barbecue, and William noticed his father's expression of cautious hope. The sight of his wife and stepmother working together without tension was exactly what Charles had been praying for since the family drama began. Harry approached with a beer for his father and a knowing smile. "Looks like your master plan is working," he observed. "It's not manipulation, Harry," Charles said firmly. "It's family healing. Sometimes people need the right environment to remember what they have in common rather than what divides them." The evening progressed with increasing warmth and laughter. The children performed an impromptu concert after dinner, with Charlotte singing a Scottish folk song she had learned from one of the castle staff. Camilla applauded enthusiastically and even suggested an encore, much to Charlotte's delight. Later, as the family gathered around a small bonfire, Charles found an opportunity to address the group informally. His words were carefully chosen, but heartfelt. "We've had some challenging months as a family," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the Highland evening air. "That's normal and perhaps even healthy. Families grow and change, and sometimes that process involves friction and misunderstandings." He paused, looking around at each face illuminated by the firelight. "But what matters most is that we remember our love for each other and our shared commitment to serving the people of our nation. We're stronger together than we are divided, and we have work to do that's bigger than any personal disagreements." "Hear, hear," William said quietly, raising his glass. The toast that followed felt genuine rather than forced, and as family members began to drift away from the fire, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of belonging without reservation or fear of judgment. She was one of the last to leave, gathering up some of the empty glasses and helping to tidy up. Camilla appeared beside her, also collecting items from the tables. "Catherine," Camilla said quietly. I owe you an apology. Catherine paused in her tidying, surprised by the directness of the statement. I've been unfair to you, Camilla continued. My behavior over the past few months has been unworthy of my position and hurtful to you personally. You didn't deserve that treatment. Thank you for saying that, Catherine replied carefully. I appreciate your honesty. I was feeling threatened, Camilla admitted. Not by you personally, but by what you represent. You're so natural at this life, so beloved by the people. Sometimes I forget that I've earned my own place here, and I let old insecurities take control. Catherine set down the glasses she had been holding and turned to face Camilla fully. We both want what's best for Charles and for the monarchy. Perhaps we've been seeing each other as competition when we should be seeing each other as allies. I'd like that, Camilla said simply. I'd like to start again, if you're willing. The handshake they shared wasn't the warm embrace of best friends, but it was genuine and respectful. More importantly, it was witnessed by Charles, who had quietly approached to help with the cleanup and had overheard the crucial parts of their conversation. The rest of the Balmoral visit passed without incident, but with a noticeably lighter atmosphere. Catherine and Camilla didn't become close friends overnight, but they found ways to interact professionally and pleasantly. More importantly, the children sensed the improvement in family dynamics and responded with increased happiness and security. On their last evening, Charles requested a private word with Catherine as they walked through the castle's portrait gallery. The conversation echoed their first serious talk on the palace balcony weeks earlier, but this time the tone was triumphant rather than troubled. You handled that beautifully, Charles said. The grace you showed Camilla, the way you met her halfway, it speaks to your character and your understanding of what this family needs. We all needed healing, Catherine replied. I'm just glad we found a way forward that works for everyone. Your African tour is going to be magnificent, Charles continued. You have my full confidence and support, and I know you'll represent our country with distinction. As the royal convoy prepared to leave Scotland and return to London, everyone understood that something fundamental had shifted. The crisis that had threatened to fracture the family had instead revealed their underlying strength and commitment to each other. Catherine looked back at Balmoral Castle as their car pulled away, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The road ahead still held challenges, but she now faced them with the certainty that she had her place in this remarkable family, and that place was secure. 6 months after the Balmoral reconciliation, Catherine stood on the red carpet outside a conservation center in Kenya, surrounded by excited children from local schools who had gathered to welcome the Princess of Wales. Her African tour had been everything Charles had predicted, a magnificent success that showcased both her diplomatic skills and her genuine passion for environmental conservation. The transformation in family dynamics since those difficult summer days was evident in every aspect of the trip. Camilla had personally assisted with some of the planning, using her own contacts from previous royal tours to smooth the way for several key meetings. More surprising still, she had publicly endorsed the tour in a magazine interview, describing Catherine as exactly the right person to represent Britain's commitment to conservation in Africa. William watched his wife from the small crowd of officials and journalists, his pride evident to anyone who cared to look. The confidence she radiated now was genuine and unshakable, built on the solid foundation of family support and her own proven abilities. The nervous, uncertain woman who had sat alone in the palace breakfast room all those months ago seemed like a distant memory. She's really found her stride, hasn't she? The voice belonged to Sir Jonathan, the king's private secretary, who had accompanied the tour to observe Catherine's development as a senior royal. His Majesty will be pleased with the reports we send back. Indeed, Charles had been following every detail of the tour from London, reading dispatch reports, and watching news coverage with the satisfaction of a mentor whose protégé had exceeded all expectations. The images of Catherine planting trees with local children, meeting with wildlife conservation experts, and speaking passionately about climate change were exactly what the modern monarchy needed. The highlight of the tour came during Catherine's visit to a school that had been built with funding from one of her charitable initiatives. The children had prepared songs and dances to welcome her, but what moved her most was a simple letter written by a 12-year-old girl named Amara. Your Royal Highness, the letter read, my teacher says you care about our animals and our forests. I want to be like you when I grow up and help save the elephants. Thank you for coming to our country and for caring about us. Catherine had to compose herself before responding to the children. the simple sincerity of Amara's words reminding her why she had chosen to embrace this role despite all its challenges. This was the impact she could have, the lives she could touch, the positive change she could inspire. Back in London, the royal household was experiencing a period of unprecedented harmony. The staff no longer walked on eggshells, carefully navigating between competing loyalties. Instead, there was a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect that made everyone's work more effective and enjoyable. Camilla had found her own comfortable rhythm within this new dynamic. Her insecurities had not vanished overnight, but she had learned to channel them into positive energy rather than destructive jealousy. She threw herself into her own charitable work with renewed vigor, particularly focusing on literacy programs and support for survivors of domestic violence. The two women had developed what could best be described as a professional friendship, cordial, respectful, and occasionally even warm. They would never be confidants or intimate friends, but they had found a way to coexist that strengthened rather than undermined the royal family's public image. Charles observed these changes with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully navigated one of the most challenging periods of his reign. The lesson hadn't been lost on him. Family dynamics within the royal house directly affected their ability to serve the nation effectively. Unity wasn't just personally desirable, it was professionally essential. The king's approach to family management had evolved as well. He was more proactive now in addressing tensions before they escalated, more willing to have difficult conversations when necessary, and more conscious of how his own actions and words affected the delicate balance of relationships within the family. One particularly meaningful moment came during Catherine's return from Africa. Charles had arranged for a small family gathering to hear her first-hand account of the tour. As Catherine shared stories and showed photographs from her travels, Camilla listened with genuine interest and asked thoughtful questions about the conservation projects. "The work you're doing with those anti-poaching units is remarkable," Camilla commented during Catherine's presentation. "Have you considered expanding the program to other regions facing similar challenges?" It was exactly the kind of substantive, supportive question that showed how far their relationship had progressed. Catherine appreciated not just the content of the question, but the tone, collegial rather than competitive, curious rather than critical. The ripple effects of the family's healing extended beyond the immediate household. Other royal family members noticed the improved atmosphere and found their own roles easier to fulfill. Harry, in particular, benefited from having his father less distracted by domestic tensions and more available for guidance and support. The British media, always quick to pick up on royal family dynamics, began reporting on what they termed the new royal harmony. Articles appeared praising both Catherine's growing confidence and Camilla's gracious acceptance of her daughter-in-law's rising profile. The coverage was largely positive, focusing on how the different generations of royal women complemented rather than competed with each other. Public opinion polls reflected this improved perception. Support for the monarchy had actually increased during the year, with particular approval for how the family had handled what royal biographers would later describe as a crucial test of their unity and adaptability. William noticed the change most in private moments. The way Catherine slept better now, the return of her easy laughter, her renewed enthusiasm for planning future projects. The weight that had pressed down on her shoulders for so many months had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging that made her even more effective in her royal role. "I'm proud of how you handled everything," he told her one evening as they reviewed plans for their upcoming Christmas celebrations. "The way you never stooped to pettiness or retaliation, the grace you showed even when you were hurting, that's why Father was right to support you so strongly." "It wasn't just about me," Catherine replied thoughtfully. "It was about proving that this family can grow and change and accommodate different personalities and perspectives. We're stronger now because we went through that difficult period and came out the other side." The Christmas gathering that year was markedly different from the previous year's tense family dinners. Laughter came easily, conversations flowed naturally, and there was a genuine warmth that even the most tradition-bound staff members noticed and appreciated. Charles used his Christmas broadcast to the nation to speak about the importance of family unity and the power of forgiveness and understanding in overcoming differences. While he didn't reference the royal family's own experiences directly, those who knew the behind-the-scenes story understood the personal significance of his words. "In times of challenge," the king said, looking directly into the camera with the wisdom earned through experience, "we discover what truly matters: our love for each other, our shared values, and our commitment to serving something greater than ourselves. These bonds, tested and proven strong, become the foundation for even greater achievements in the years ahead. As the camera pulled back to show the king surrounded by his family in the drawing room at Sandringham, viewers could see the genuine affection and unity he was describing. Catherine and Camilla sat near each other, both engaged and relaxed. The children played quietly nearby while the adults conversed easily. It was the image of a royal family that had learned to honor both tradition and change, that had found ways to accommodate different personalities and perspectives while maintaining their essential purpose. Most importantly, it was the image of a family that had chosen unity over division, understanding over resentment, and love over pride. The woman who had once sat alone at breakfast, wondering if she belonged in this extraordinary family, now knew with certainty that she not only belonged but was valued, supported, and loved. Catherine's journey from isolation to integration had strengthened not just her own position, but the entire institution she had sworn to serve. In the months and years that followed, royal biographers would mark this period as a turning point in the modern monarchy's evolution, a time when the family proved it could adapt and heal without losing its essential character or purpose. But for those who lived through it, the real significance was simpler and more personal. They had chosen to be a family in the fullest sense of the word, with all the challenges and rewards that choice entailed. The future stretched ahead with new possibilities and challenges, but they would face them together, united in their commitment to each other and to the people they served. The palace walls that had once echoed with tension now resonated with harmony, and the silence that had once been uncomfortable was now peaceful and content.